The Vardessi fleet dropped out of transit at 3:12, and every sensor array on the Thornwall lit up before the first hull cleared the fold. Marin Solis was already at her station. She had been there for 11 hours because the transit projections had been narrowing for 4 days, and she trusted numbers over sleep. The Thornwall's main board showed 312 contacts arranging themselves in a standard approach cone 40,000 kilometers above the equator. She had seen that formation in the archived footage from the old records. The same spacing, the same slow lateral spread, the same assumption that whatever was below them would not notice or would not dare respond. She keyed the intercom. Defense Command, Thornwall 7. Confirmed Vardessi transit emergence, 312 hulls, approach vector standard oblique, holding at 40,000. Requesting authorization to bring Tier 1 to active. The reply came back in 4 seconds. Thornwall 7 Defense Command, Tier 1 authorized. Welcome to 2089 Solis. She pulled the Tier 1 key from the chain at her throat and turned it in the console. Outside the observation glass, the sky above the Andes was still dark and perfectly clear. Then the orbital batteries began their charge cycle, and the edges of the horizon took on a faint green shimmer as 3,000 platforms woke simultaneously across every latitude. The shimmer pulsed once-twice, as the handshake protocols confirmed each ring in sequence. Low orbit, mid-orbit, high. The battery rings stacked up like the layers of a fortress wall, each one visible to any sensor array that cared to look. The Vardessi fleet slowed. They had noticed. Then it kept coming anyway. Marin watched the approach velocity on her board. The fleet had reduced from transit emergent speed but had not stopped. It was still closing, slowly, but closing. She counted the seconds. The standard Vardessi contact protocol from the 2061 records called for a holding halt at 40,000. They were not holding. Defense Command, Thornwall 7. Fleet is not halting. Current closure rate is, she checked the figure, 4 kilometers per second. Request Tier 2 authorization. A pause that lasted exactly 3 seconds. Thornwall 7, Tier 2 authorized. Hold until 35,000 before active fire solution. She turned the second key. Along the orbital rings, 2,000 additional platforms came to active lock. Their targeting arrays swept the incoming fleet in a coordinated pass that any Vardessi sensor package would read as clearly as a searchlight. The sky above every major landmass brightened another degree, the high-altitude shield generators adding their own layered output to the signature, a planetary silhouette that would show on approach scans as dense, fortified, ready. Not threatening, not firing, but unmistakably prepared. The fleet stopped at 39,000 kilometers. It held for 9 minutes. Then a single hull detached from the formation's leading edge and began a slow, deliberate drift toward Earth. Not a high-speed run, something worse. A considered movement, the kind that said, "We are testing whether your restraint is real." Marin's finger rested on the Tier 3 cover. Tier 3 was not orbital batteries. Tier 3 was the deep-range rail platforms, the ones that could engage a hull at 100,000 kilometers and reduce it to particulate before the target registered the shot. She had never fired Tier 3. Nobody had. It had been built so nobody would have to. Defense Command, Thornwall 7. Single hull detaching, drift vector toward atmosphere. Request guidance. Thornwall 7 Defense Command. Target and hold. Fire if the hull crosses 30,000. Confirm. Confirmed. She opened the cover. Fleet, she said on the wideband channel, her voice carrying the same flat weight it had held for the last hour. The detaching vessel is being targeted by Earth deep-range platforms. It will not reach 30,000 kilometers. Please recall it. 11 seconds of silence. 14 for signal travel, but the response came before the travel time was up, which meant the fleet commander had already been watching and already knew what the targeting lock looked like on their screens. The detached hull stopped. Then it reversed slowly and rejoined the formation. Lieutenant Yao let out a breath. Marin did not. "They needed to know if we'd do it," he said. "Now they know," she said. 28 years earlier, she had stood in a different place with a different sky above her, the coastal launch pad at Bahia Solano, where the evacuation shuttles were still lifting every 90 minutes. She was 16, and her father was on the manifest for the third wave. He had not wanted to go. He had argued against it in the kitchen for 2 weeks, voice low so her younger brother would not hear. But the Vardessi invitation had been specific. 1,000 human volunteers, transported to a way station beyond the outer belt to learn, to exchange, to return. He was a xenobiologist. They had asked for him by name. "Come with us," he had said, his duffel over one shoulder, the morning light flat and gray. No, she had been calm about it. 16 and certain in the way that only the very young or the very convicted can be. Someone has to stay. "Marin, I'll be here when you come back." He had looked at her for a long moment. Then he had hugged her, hard, and she had not cried. She had watched the shuttle climb until it was a silver point, and then nothing, and then she had gone home and started reading everything she could find about Vardessi weapon systems. She was not the only one who stayed. Millions stayed, and they spent the years that followed making choices her father would not recognize when he returned. "Fleet Commander Vardessi," Marin said, opening the wideband channel. Her voice was even. She had rehearsed this, not the words exactly, but the register, the measured weight of it. "This is Watch Officer Marin Solis of Earth Thornwall Station 7. You are entering monitored space. Your approach is logged and your transit coordinates are on record. Please hold your current position and identify your mission." There was a delay, about 14 seconds, accounting for signal travel and translation lag. Then a voice that was not quite the right frequency for human hearing even through the filters said, "Earth Station, we are the returning transit of the Vardessi Exchange. We carry the 1,000 who accepted the invitation in 2061. We are seeking clearance to approach and complete the return." Marin had known this was the likely answer. Her hands did not shake. 1,000 was not quite right. The count her sensors returned was 1,143, aboard Vardessi hulls that had not been old in 2061 and were showing wear now. But there were also human biosignatures in the mix, 106 of them, distributed across 9 of the leading ships. 106 of the original 1,000. She did not let herself calculate which names might be in that number. Not yet. That was not her job in this moment. "Fleet, you are acknowledged," she said. "Human biosignatures aboard your lead vessels are confirmed. Earth Defense Command is reviewing your request. You will hold position at 39,000 kilometers. Any advance before clearance is granted will be treated as a hostile approach. Please acknowledge." A pause. Then acknowledged Earth Station. The green shimmer along the horizon pulsed once, steadily, as the Tier 2 batteries held their lock. On the secondary board, the fleet's power output signatures shifted, weapon capacitors standing down, drive plumes cooling to station-keeping levels. Reading it, Lieutenant Yao exhaled audibly from the adjacent console. "They're reading the grid," he said, not quite to her. "Yes," Marin said, "let them read it." The years between the departure and now had not been quiet. That was the thing the Vardessi, if they had been paying attention to Earth rather than to their own affairs, might have understood. The planet they had lifted 1,000 curious volunteers from was not the planet that waited for them now. In 2063, after the survey drones, Earth had begun the Thornwall program. By 2071, the first orbital battery ring was operational. By 2078, it circled the planet 3 times over at staggered altitudes. In 2082, the atmospheric shield generator arrays went online along the mountain ranges, the Andes, the Himalayas, the Rockies, and the sky above them changed color slightly on clear nights, a pale shimmer that children who grew up after the departure had always assumed was simply how the sky looked. It had been a patient 26 years, not angry, not paranoid, the kind of discipline that comes from a species visited without full understanding, one that had decided, collectively and without drama, that it would never again stand beneath an unknown fleet with nothing but questions. The Thornwall was not fear made concrete, it was memory made operational. Marin had joined the program at 22, straight out of defense engineering. 4 years on the battery ring maintenance crews before moving to watch officer training. She had done it because she believed in the work, and also, honestly, because every hour she spent on it was an hour she was keeping the promise she had made on a launch pad in 2061. The Thornwall's secondary board showed Defense Command running identification scans on the human biosignatures. The process took 18 minutes. Then a priority channel opened from Command directly to Marin's earpiece. Solis, we have names on 92 of the 106, cross-referenced with 2061 departure manifests. One of them is listed as Ernesto Solis, xenobiologist, Wave 3. You are flagged as next of kin on record. Marin closed her eyes, just for a second. Understood, she said. You are not required to handle the communication if you want to stand down. No, she opened her eyes. The Vardessi fleet was a cluster of lights at 39,000 kilometers, still and patient. I'll handle it. She was 44 years old. She had spent more than half her life in preparation for an event she had told herself she was not personally waiting for. She had done the work, the training, the watch rotations, the protocol drills, the cold study of alien propulsion signatures in the dark hours before dawn, and she had been good at it, good enough to hold a Thornwall station command at 38. She had friends here, a life here. She had stayed, and she had not regretted it. She had also never stopped keeping the spare cot in her quarters folded flat, the way she had first set it up when she arrived on station. Not as a memorial, just as a fact. Vardessi fleet, she said on the wide channel. This is Watch Officer Solis. Earth Defense Command is prepared to permit a limited approach for the vessels carrying human passengers. 9 ships, human-crewed escort accompaniment, direct vector to Bahia Solano atmospheric entry point. The remaining vessels will hold at 39,000. Defense grids will remain active throughout. Please confirm you understand these terms. The pause was longer this time. 14 seconds for signal travel, and then some additional time for what she assumed was internal deliberation among beings who had come here expecting a quieter arrival. Earth Station, the Vardessi voice said, these terms are accepted. We understand. Earth is different from what we left. Yes, Marin said, it is. She did not elaborate. The green shimmer along the horizon was elaboration enough. 5,000 platforms warm, locked, not fired, that restraint was its own statement. Earth could have answered the transit emergence with fire before the Vardessi fleet had finished forming its approach cone. It had not. It had asked, and it had listened, and when the fleet kept moving, it had shown its second layer without apology, and when a single hull tested the limit, it had opened the Tier 3 cover without hesitation. That sequence was a complete sentence, and the Vardessi fleet had read every word. 9 ships separated from the formation and began their descent vector. Marin tracked them on the board, handed off the active grid monitoring to Lieutenant Yao, and walked to the observation window. The atmospheric entry was clean. Human-piloted escort vessels bracketed the 9 Vardessi ships through the upper stratosphere and down to the Bahia Solano landing field, the same coastal field where the evacuation shuttles had lifted 28 years before, the same flat gray light in the early morning, the same long concrete, longer now, extended twice over and reinforced with material that did not exist in 2061. The escort fighters flew in pairs, precise and unhurried, the green shimmer of the planetary grid still running faintly along their hull emitters. Marin watched the telemetry on a secondary monitor. She had not asked to be there at Bahia Solano. That would have been abandoning her post, while the rest of the Vardessi fleet still sat at 39,000 with the grid still warm. She was not the kind of person who abandoned her post. The channel from Bahia Solano opened an hour after the landing confirmation. Thornwall 7. This is ground coordination at Bahia Solano. We have a passenger here who is asking for Watch Officer Solis. Says he wants to speak before he clears processing. Says his name is Ernesto. Marin looked at the ceiling of the station for a moment. Then she pressed the key. Patch him through. A brief static interval. Then a voice she recognized despite 28 years and whatever the distance had done to it. Marin. Dad. A long pause. She could hear breathing unsteady, the way breathing goes when a person is trying to hold something together and not quite managing. She wondered what he saw when he stepped off that ship, the extended concrete, the escort fighters with their hull emitters still carrying the grid's green shimmer, the ground crew in reinforced gear, the mountain ridgeline behind the field where the shield generator arrays rose like a new range of hills that had grown up while he was away. She wondered if it looked like a fortress to him, because it was, and she was proud of that. You stayed, he said. I told you I would. Another pause, then quietly, what did you build? She looked at the board. The Vardessi fleet was still holding at 39,000, patient now in the way that things are patient when they have correctly assessed their situation. 105 other people were stepping off 9 ships into a world that had prepared for their return, and for every other possibility simultaneously. The sky above the Andes was beginning to lighten toward dawn, the battery ring shimmer fading into the approaching blue. Something worth coming back to, she said. On the board, the Vardessi fleet held position. It would hold there for 3 more days while negotiations ran through the proper channels, while the human returnees cleared processing, while Earth's diplomatic tier decided what the relationship looked like from here. The grid stayed warm throughout, not stubbornness, but honesty. Earth had learned in 28 years to be honest about what it was. The grid had not fired, the ships had not fled, and somewhere on a landing field by the coast, her father was standing on Earth again. She had made a promise at 16 and kept it for 28 years, 1 watch rotation at a time. That was enough to start with. The rest was work, and Marin Solis had never been afraid of work.